I never thought a simple curiosity would shatter my world. It started with the GPS history on my husband's phone, something I'd never bothered to check before. But that morning, after a restless night of questions I couldn't voice, I swiped open the app. My hands trembled as the map loaded, the tiny blue dots forming a trail that made my chest tighten. Every day, every single day, his car parked in front of my sister's house. Not once, not twice, but a pattern so deliberate it was almost mocking. I stared at the screen, my stomach knotting, my mind racing. Why? Why would he? The thought looped over and over, and I felt the sharp edge of betrayal before I even confronted him. I could hear the quiet hum of our suburban street outside, the birds chirping like nothing had changed, completely unaware that my life had just tilted on its axis. I touched the screen again, hoping somehow that I had misread it. But the dates, the times, the exact addresses, there was no denying it. My heart pounded as a cold, creeping anger replaced my disbelief. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a world that no longer made sense. I had loved him, trusted him, built a life with him, and now every memory felt tainted. I knew I couldn't speak to him yet, not without gathering every piece, every detail. I needed to understand the depth of this betrayal before I could act. But even as I told myself to be rational, my mind wandered to my sister's face, the one I'd confided in for years, the one I thought I could trust. And now, I wasn't sure who I could trust at all. The map glowed in the dim light of the kitchen, each dot a dagger, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that nothing in my life would ever feel the same again. I couldn't stop myself from replaying every moment, every conversation, looking for signs I'd missed. How had I not seen this? How had I trusted so blindly? My hands shook as I scrolled through the GPS history again, tracing the familiar route from our driveway to my sister's street. Every time it was the same. Her house, late morning, sometimes early afternoon. I tried to hear my own voice in my head, telling myself to calm down, to think, but it was impossible. I felt like a stranger in my own home, walking through the rooms we'd shared for years. I could still smell the faint scent of his cologne in the living room, hear the quiet scrape of the coffee mug against the counter, and it made my stomach twist. I decided I had to see for myself. I needed proof beyond the map, beyond the dots. Maybe if I followed him one day, I could understand what was really going on. But the thought of confronting my sister first, looking her in the eyes while knowing what I now knew, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. That night, I lay awake, listening to the house breathe around me. I thought about our conversations, our fights, the little annoyances I'd brushed off. I thought about the way he laughed at her jokes in family photos, the casual mentions of her name that never seemed significant. Each memory twisted into something unrecognizable. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't hide from it anymore. I had to confront them both, carefully, deliberately. I couldn't let my emotions rule me, not yet. But even as I made a plan, a small, bitter part of me wanted to see him caught in the act, to watch the truce crash down on them the way it had crashed down on me. I dressed quietly, my hands brushing against the soft fabric of my sweater, the texture grounding me. I didn't know if I was ready to face them, but I knew I had to. The blue dots on the map were waiting, and so was the confrontation I could no longer avoid. I parked a block away from my sister's house, my heart hammering so loudly I thought she'd hear it through the walls. The morning sun glinted off the windows, mocking me with its normalcy. I watched through the windshield as his car rolled into the driveway, exactly on time, like clockwork. I followed him inside, keeping to the shadows. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread hit me first, domestic and familiar, making my stomach twist with anger. Then I saw them, laughing together on the couch, faces inches apart, the comfort of their closeness sickening in its casualness. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them feel the ache that had been eating at me for days. But I stayed hidden, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I had to process it, watch it, remember it. Proof was nothing without context, but this, I was seeing it in real life. Their conversation was casual, but every word cut me. The jokes, the shared memories, the ease between them. It was a knife twisting in slow motion. I couldn't believe how long it had been going on, how effortlessly they hid it. I felt a storm building in my chest, hot and dangerous, threatening to spill over. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed up the driveway, my shoes crunching on the gravel like gunshots. Their heads snapped up in unison, surprise and guilt flashing across their faces. What are you doing here?" my sister stammered, her voice shaky. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The map on my phone, the dots I had traced so many times, they were all I needed. My eyes met my husband's, and in that look, every lie, every betrayal, every secret was laid bare. "I know," I said finally, my voice cold but steady. "I know everything." The silence that followed my words was suffocating. My sister's face went pale, her lips parting as if to say something, but nothing came out. My husband's eyes darted between us, guilt and panic etched into every line of his face. I felt the air thicken, the room shrinking around me as if the walls themselves were judging them. You knew?" he finally muttered, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to believe it, I said, taking a slow, deliberate step toward them. "But the GPS doesn't lie. Every day, every trip, to your house." My voice shook, not with fear, but with rage, hurt, and betrayal rolled into a single, sharp edge. My sister opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. "Save it. I don't want excuses. I don't want your lies. I want the truth." The truth hung in the room like a storm cloud. My husband swallowed hard. It didn't mean anything," he started, fumbling for words. I don't know how it happened. His voice trailed off, but the shame in his eyes said more than any words could. My sister's shoulders slumped, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I swear I didn't." I couldn't listen anymore. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach churn. Years of trust, love, and shared life, the foundation of everything I had built, was crumbling in front of me, and they both stood there, waiting for forgiveness, waiting for understanding, when all I felt was betrayal so deep it burned. I backed toward the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed my keys. "I need time," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need space. I need to breathe without seeing lies everywhere." As I walked away, the late morning sun hitting my back felt like both a curse and a blessing. I didn't know what came next, only that I couldn't stay in that room any longer. And as their whispered apologies chased me down the driveway, I realized this was only the beginning. The fallout, the reckoning, and the way I would rise from it was still ahead. The drive home felt endless, the streets blurring past me, but every turn of the wheel brought a mix of clarity and chaos. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened, the leather digging into my palms like a grounding force. I had to get home, had to be alone with my thoughts, my pain, my anger, everything swirling inside me like a storm threatening to break. I walked into the house and immediately noticed the familiar scent, the comfort of home that now felt tainted. I poured myself a glass of water, but it trembled in my hands, spilling across the counter, tiny rivulets running like the cracks in my heart. I thought about the years of trust I had given, the late nights we spent laughing, the quiet mornings sipping coffee together, sharing dreams. And now, all of it felt like sand slipping through my fingers, disappearing into a reality I didn't want to accept. I sank onto the couch, letting my head fall back against the cushions. My mind replayed the morning, every detail seared into memory. Their laughter, the casual intimacy, the way he avoided my eyes but couldn't hide the guilt. I felt rage rising, a fire in my chest that made my hands shake and my stomach knot. But beneath it, deeper and rawer, was the ache of betrayal, the kind that goes beyond anger, beyond words, beyond logic. I thought about confronting them again, about demanding answers, about tearing apart the carefully constructed lies. But I knew that wouldn't heal me. It would only prolong the poison. I needed control, not chaos. I needed to reclaim myself, to rebuild from the ashes of what they had broken. So I made a plan. First, I would gather my strength. I would face my husband, not as the betrayed, crying woman I felt like inside, but as someone who could demand accountability, who could define her own terms. Then I would confront my sister, not for revenge, but to reclaim the narrative she had tried to steal. Every word, every step would be mine to command. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. I could still feel the sting of betrayal, but beneath it, a new fire was forming, a quiet, determined blaze. I would not be broken by their deceit. I would rise, stronger, smarter, and more fearless than before. Hours passed as I sat in silence, plotting my next moves. By nightfall, I felt the first spark of clarity in days. I knew the confrontations ahead would be messy, painful, and raw, but I also knew I would emerge unshaken. The betrayal had marked the beginning of a transformation, and for the first time since seeing the GPS history, I felt a strange sense of control. I was no longer just the woman who had been deceived. I was becoming the woman who would decide the consequences, the one who would shape the outcome, the one who would reclaim her life on her own terms. The next morning, I woke up with a cold, steady resolve. No more sitting in silence, no more letting their deceit define me. I dressed deliberately, choosing clothes that made me feel strong, in control. A crisp blouse, dark jeans, heels that clicked against the hardwood floor with authority. Today, I would reclaim my power. I called my husband first. His voice on the other end was tentative, guilty, like a child caught sneaking cookies before dinner. "Can we talk?" I said, my tone calm but sharp. No distractions, no excuses, just the truth. He arrived an hour later, shifting nervously in the doorway. I didn't rise to meet him. I stayed seated, letting the silence stretch until it pressed on him, until the weight of it became unbearable. He stammered, tried to explain, but I stopped him. "No, don't start with excuses. Just answer one question. Why?" His shoulders sagged. I was lonely. I don't know. It just happened. I felt the anger rise, hot and bright, but I kept it controlled. I leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. "You betrayed me. You betrayed this marriage, and you betrayed the trust I placed in you. That's not something you fix with words. That's something you earn back if it's even possible." He flinched at my words, and for the first time, I felt the shift, the imbalance of power sliding toward me. I was no longer the one pleading, questioning, doubting. I was the one defining the terms. "I need time," I continued, "and until I decide otherwise, you respect my space. No calls, no texts, no appearances in my life that aren't earned." He nodded, defeated, and left. The door closing behind him sounded like the final click of a lock, one I had placed. Then came my sister. I called her too, my voice steady even. "We need to talk, face to face, and don't lie to me." When she arrived, tears welling in her eyes, I didn't rush to hug her or offer comfort. Instead, I let her stand there, absorbing the weight of what she had done. "You think I don't know what's been happening," I said, each word measured. "I know, every detail, and I want you to understand that what you've done isn't just a mistake. It's a choice, and choices have consequences." Her apology was shaky, desperate, but I let her speak. Then I spoke, clear, unflinching, outlining boundaries, defining how she could exist in my life from now on. No lies, no hidden motives, no betrayals. She left with her own weight of shame, and I watched her go, feeling the first real sense of release. I sank onto the couch afterward, exhaustion washing over me, but unlike before, it was calm, almost cleansing. The betrayal had been a storm, but now I had taken my stand. The dots on the GPS were no longer just evidence of deceit. They were markers on a path I had chosen. My path, not theirs. For the first time in days, I felt a pulse of something stronger than hurt, something like power, like freedom, like clarity. The days that followed were mine entirely. I rediscovered the small joys I'd let slip away. Morning runs through the neighborhood, the crisp air filling my lungs and clearing my mind. Late night drives with the radio blaring, singing out the anger and the grief until it transformed into something fierce and steady. Evenings curled up with books I'd ignored, letting stories remind me that life was still vast, still mine. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, women who lifted me up without judgment, whose laughter patched the cracks I hadn't realized were so deep. Each conversation, each shared memory, each belly laugh was a stitch in the armor I was rebuilding around myself. I began to feel whole again, not because the betrayal had vanished, but because I was reclaiming my agency. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, meetings, late nights at the office. The focus, the achievement, the respect I earned there reminded me of who I was outside the lies. I noticed the subtle glances from colleagues, the way they leaned into my ideas, the unspoken acknowledgement that I was formidable. I soaked it in. I needed that reminder. I was more than what had been broken in my personal life. And then, one evening, standing in the kitchen as the sun dipped low, painting the room in gold, I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection no longer carried the weight of betrayal. It held something sharper, something stronger. A woman who had faced deceit, heartbreak, and humiliation, and had refused to let it define her. I didn't need apologies anymore. I didn't need excuses. I needed truth, boundaries, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had risen above what tried to shatter me. The anger had softened into determination. The hurt had evolved into clarity. And in that clarity, I realized I had something far more valuable than revenge. Myself, unbroken, unashamed, and unapologetically whole. The GPS dots still haunted the edge of my memory, but now they were not daggers. They were landmarks of survival, proof not of their betrayal, but of my awakening. I had looked at the path they had walked, and I had chosen a different one that led to strength, freedom, and peace. I smiled then, small and fierce, knowing that no matter what came next, I had already won. Weeks passed, and the tension that had once clung to me like a second skin began to fade. But I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. Not for revenge, but for closure. I arranged to meet my husband one last time, in a neutral place, a quiet cafe where the air smelled of coffee and possibility. He arrived, nervous, shifting in his seat as if expecting the storm I once was. But I had changed. The fire inside me was no longer raw and reckless. It was steady, controlled, and unshakable. I looked at him, not with anger, but with clarity. "This is it," I said calmly. "I faced what you did, and I faced what it did to me. I've set my boundaries. I've taken back my life. You don't get to define me anymore." He opened his mouth, trying to apologize, but I shook my head. Apologies are not currency here. Actions are. You've made your choices. I've made mine. I'm moving forward, and you need to accept that. His shoulders slumped. I saw guilt, shame, and regret, but none of it could touch the life I had reclaimed. I stood, letting the finality settle between us like a silent bell tolling. "Goodbye," I said, and for the first time in months, I felt the full weight of freedom. Next, I reached out to my sister, not for reconciliation yet, but to set the last line in the sand. We met in a park, the autumn leaves swirling around us, a reminder of cycles, of endings and beginnings. I looked her in the eyes and said, "I've forgiven myself for letting this hurt me so deeply. I've forgiven you for your choices, because holding on to them only traps me. But I won't forget, and I won't let this happen again." Her tears were quiet, sincere, and in that moment I felt an unexpected release, not just of betrayal, but of the power they had once held over me. I walked away from both of them that day, lighter than I had been in years. The betrayal had been a crucible, burning away the illusions, the dependence, the trust that had been broken. But what remained was stronger, me, fully awake, fully alive, and fully mine. That night in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and looked out over the city lights. The world was vast and full of possibility. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and I had emerged whole. I had reclaimed my life, my choices, my joy. And the truth I had unearthed, harsh as it was, had become my greatest gift. The certainty that I could endure anything, rise above it, and thrive. I smiled, feeling the pulse of freedom, the thrill of survival. The past was behind me, and for the first time, the future felt wide open, waiting for me to step into it, on my own terms, unafraid, unstoppable.